We stood staring at the tent. It was collapsed, covered in thick green moss and ripped open by years of wind and rain. It smelled like wet earth and total ruin. It looked like it had been rotting in that clearing for 20 years. But I knew that blue backpack spilling out of the ripped door. I knew the specific red patch sewn onto the side pocket, because I had sewn it on last night, and I had packed that bag this morning. My name is Mark. I need to tell you what happened in the Blackwood Pines because I don't think anyone else will believe me. And honestly, I'm not sure I believe it myself anymore. It was supposed to be a simple weekend trip, just me, my best friend David, and his sister, Sarah. We were experienced hikers. We knew how to read a map, we had good gear, and we weren't stupid. We chose Blackwood Pines because it was remote. We wanted to get away from the city noise, from our phones, from everything. We parked our car at the trailhead at 8 a.m. on a Saturday. The sun was bright, the air was crisp, it felt perfect. David slapped me on the shoulder. "Race you to the ridgeline," he laughed, already jogging ahead. Sarah just shook her head, smiling, checking the GPS clipped to her belt. "Don't get lost before we even start, idiots," she called out. We entered the tree line. The first hour was great. The trail was wide and easy to follow. We were loud, making jokes, enjoying the burn in our legs. But the deeper we went, the more the forest seemed to change. It wasn't sudden, it was a slow shift. The trees got taller, thicker. Their branches wooved together overhead like a tight roof, blocking out the sun. By noon, it felt like twilight. And the silence. That was the first thing that really bothered me. No birds, no squirrels rustling in the dry leaves, just the sound of our own boots hitting the dirt. Around 1 p.m., we reached a fork in the path that wasn't on Sarah's map. "Which way?" I asked. Sarah frowned at the GPS screen. "It doesn't show a fork, it just shows the trail going straight." "Well, the trail definitely splits," David said, kicking a stone down the left path. "Let's go left, looks more interesting." We went left. 20 minutes later, the path just ended. It didn't fade out, it just stopped at a thick, thorny bushes that were impossible to pass through. "Dead end," I said. "We have to turn back to the fork." We turned around, we walked back the way we came. We walked for 20 minutes, then 30, then 40. We never found the fork. We were just walking on a straight path that seemed to go on forever. "We missed it," David said, sounding annoyed. "We must have walked right past it." "How could we miss a fork in the road, David?" Sarah asked. Her voice was a little tight. "Let's just keep going," I said, trying to sound calm. "We'll hit a landmark eventually." Another hour passed. The woods looked exactly the same. Every tree looked like the tree next to it. We decided to take a break. We sat on a large, flat, gray rock. David was getting restless. "Okay, this is stupid," David said, standing up. He pulled out his large hunting knife. "I'm going to make sure we aren't walking in circles." He walked over to a bright white birch tree directly opposite from the rock. He carved a large, deep X into the bark. The white wood underneath shone brightly in the gloom. "There," he said. "Now if we see that X again, we know we're screwed." We kept walking. The forest was getting darker. It felt heavy. You know that feeling when a thunderstorm is about to break and the air feels thick? It was like that, but constant. We walked for what felt like miles. My legs were burning. Then David stopped dead in his tracks. "No way," he whispered. We were back at the gray rock, the same flat rock we had rested on. "See?" Sarah said. her voice shaking now. "I told you we were walking in circles." David shook his head. "No, we walked straight. I swear we walked straight." He walked over to the birch tree, the one directly across from the rock. He stood there for a long time, just staring at the trunk. "David?" I called out. "Is the X there?" He turned around slowly. His face was pale in the dim light. "Come look at this, Mark." I walked over. I looked at the birch tree. The bark was perfectly smooth. There was no X. There was no scratch. It was as if he had never touched it. "I don't understand," David mumbled, running his hand over the smooth bark. "I carved it deep. I watched the wood chip away." A cold knot formed in my stomach. Maybe it's the wrong tree. It's the only birch tree in this entire cluster of pines, Mark. It's the tree. We tried again. This time, Sarah took a roll of bright orange surveyor's tape from her pack. She tied a long ribbon around the tree branch. We walked away. We counted 500 steps. We turned around and walked 500 steps back. The ribbon was gone. The branch was bare. It wasn't wind. There was no wind. Someone, or something, was cleaning up after us, erasing our presence. That's when the real panic set in. "Check the GPS again," David snapped at Sarah. Sarah unclipped it. She stared at the screen, her eyes going wide. "What?" I asked. She turned the screen towards us. The little digital arrow that represented us wasn't moving slowly. It was flying across the digital map. According to the GPS, we were currently moving south at 60 miles an hour. "It's broken," Sarah whispered. We looked at our feet. We were standing perfectly still in the dirt. We looked back at the screen. The arrow had crossed the entire mountain range in 10 seconds. "We aren't moving," I said stupidly. "Sarah, why does it think we're moving so fast?" She looked up at me, and I'll never forget the look in her eyes. It was pure, primal terror. "Maybe we aren't," she said softly, "but the world around us is." I have never felt small like I did in that moment. It felt like the forest wasn't just trees anymore. It felt like a giant living stomach that we had walked into, and it was slowly digesting us. Have you ever been somewhere, maybe an old house or a strange stretch of road at night, where you suddenly felt totally unwelcome, like the location itself was hostile toward you? I want to hear about that place. Tell me your story in the comments down below. We started running. It made no sense, but panic doesn't have to make sense. We just wanted out. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs gave out. Night fell completely. It didn't get dark slowly. It was like someone turned off a light switch. 1 second it was dim gray. The next it was pitch black. We huddled together, turning on our headlamps. The beams of light didn't go far. The forest seemed to swallow the light. We were exhausted, thirsty, and terrified. We stumbled through the dark for hours, hoping to just find a flat spot to collapse. Then, I smelled it. Wood smoke. "Do you smell that?" I asked. David sniffed the air. "Someone has a campfire." Hope is a dangerous thing. It gave us energy we didn't have. We pushed through the brush, following the smell. The smell changed as we got closer. It wasn't just wood smoke anymore. It was mixed with something else, something damp and rotten, like mildew and wet wool. We burst through a final thicket of bushes into a small clearing. Our headlamps swept across the space. There was a fire pit in the center, but there was no fire, just cold, wet ashes that looked like paste. And beyond the fire pit, there was a camp, There were 3 tents. They had collapsed inward, the fabric torn and faded to a sickly gray-green color. Thick moss grew over the poles. They looked ancient. "Hello?" Sarah called out, her voice trembling. "Is anyone here?" Silence. We walked closer to the nearest tent. The smell of rot was overpowering now. David knelt down by the ruin of the first tent. He used a stick to lift the slimy, torn fabric of the door. He froze. He dropped the stick and scrambled backward on his hands and feet, gasping for air. "What is it?" I yelled, shining my light where he had been. Inside the rotted tent, half buried in dirt and dead leaves, was a sleeping bag. It was covered in mildew. But at the top of the sleeping bag, where a head should be, rested a faded blue baseball cap. David's baseball cap, the one he had been wearing when we left the car this morning. He reached up to his head. His cap was gone. I must have dropped it," he stammered. "Someone found it, brought it here." He sounded desperate. He was trying to make sense of something that had no sense. Sarah walked past us, toward the second tent. She didn't say a word. She looked like she was in a trance. She knelt before the ruined second tent. She reached into the muck and pulled something out. It was a backpack, a blue backpack with a specific red patch on the side pocket. My backpack. The fabric disintegrated in her hands as she held it up. Metal pots spilled out, rusted almost entirely through. A plastic water bottle was there, cracked and yellowed with age. "Mark," she whispered, holding up a sodden lump of paper. It was my journal. I always kept it in my side pocket. The pages were fused together by dampness and time. She carefully peeled back the wet front cover. The ink had bled, but I could still read my own handwriting on the first page. "Property of Mark. If found, please call." "This isn't possible," I said. My voice sounded totally flat. I was beyond fear now. I was just numb. "I packed this today, this morning. I packed this bag this morning." We looked around the clearing, the 3 rotted tents, the ancient fire pit. It was our camp, but it was our camp if we had set it up, died here, and left it to rot for 30 years. The forest hadn't just erased our path, it had erased our time. The GPS showing us moving at incredible speed while standing still. Maybe it wasn't distance it was measuring. Maybe it was time passing us by. We were too tired to scream, too tired to cry. We sat down near the cold, wet ashes of the fire pit. We huddled together, surrounded by the ruins of our own future. We sat in silence for a long time, listening to the woods that stolen our lives. And then, the final thing happened, the thing that haunts me the most. It was just before dawn. The sky was starting to turn that sickly gray color again. We heard noises in the woods, coming from the direction we had arrived from hours ago. Voices, loud, happy voices. "Race you to the ridgeline," a man's voice laughed. "Don't get lost before we even start, idiots," a woman replied playfully. David, Sarah, and I lifted our heads. We looked at each other in the dim light, our eyes wide with a new kind of horror. We knew those voices. The sound of boots crunching on leaves got closer. They were just outside the clearing now. We sat in the rotting wreckage of our own camp, too weak to move, and listened as our younger selves walked happily into the woods, just beginning the hike that would never end.